So how do upsets happen? I think it's a very fascinating question. We're coming off of the year of the upset. It feels like upsets are happening more and more as of late. So I thought this could be an interesting video of going back, looking at some of the biggest upsets from last season and talking about what exactly happened. And the purpose of doing this is because I think it can help us learn something about what's happening next year. I'm going to assume there's going to be more crazy upsets, early on in the season, this upcoming season as it's about to start. Preseason is now underway. But if we do see a big upset, like let's just say, for example, on week 1, the Steelers beat the Bengals, which I'm assuming will be an upset, or like the Lions beat the Eagles, maybe that won't be an upset, whatever, take your pick. But if there is something that feels like a big upset week 1, the question is going to be, was that actually an upset, or was that just, these are who these teams are? And so I figured a great way to help us figure this out is look at some of what actually ended up being big upsets and what went wrong in those specific games. So the way I did it was I went through the 10 biggest upsets of last season, and I had certain categories, and I wanted to basically just check off yes, no, or kind of. A couple ended up in kind of, but most were yes or no to each category. So for example, the first category I did was penalties. And as you see right next to me now, only 1 out of 10 of these incidences had a significant difference in penalties. And one thing I did with penalties is I looked at it compared to how often the team commits penalties. Because my first thought, and the reason why I brought it up, was, penalties feels a bit luck-based. There definitely is an element of if the refs call something or, make a missed call, that can change a game in a specific direction. And while that certainly is true, at least in terms of penalty yardage, these doesn't seem to be a heavy correlation in terms of, a game causing a game to flip in one direction when it should have been in a different direction. So only 1 out of 10 had that happen, which was surprising to me. Another thought I had was sacks. Did you win the sack differential by a significant amount? Which, again, feels like a bit of you earn sacks, which you do. That is absolutely true, but there's also an element of luck involved in sacks. Did you get the pressure on the right play where the quarterback happened to hold on to the ball for too long, which got you a sack, or did the opposite happen? You got a lot of pressure, but just due to circumstance, you never actually got a lot of sacks. I thought that could be a potential way a game could swing in one direction or another. Doesn't seem to correlate too heavily. Only 3 of these games had, more than a little bit of a difference in sack totals from what you would expect. Because again, sacks are earned, right? And some teams get more sacks than other teams. But I compared it to what the team typically gets, not what an average team typically gets. And it doesn't seem to have a heavy correlation. The next one I wanted to check was third down percentage. My guess going in was third down percentage was going to actually be the biggest factor. There's definitely an element of flukiness in a third down play. It's only a few select plays. Not converting on those few select plays can actually swing a game in a massive direction. However, again, we have just 3 out of 10 of those incidences were, because of or at least featured a significant difference in what you expect their third down percentage to be. Again, if I'm doing the Chargers, it's what is the Chargers' typical third down percentage, because theirs is higher than an average team, but did they perform significantly lower than that in the actual game, or did the other team perform significantly higher, or a combination of the two? And again, it happened. So there's some reason to believe that there's something there, and in a specific game, it still can cause an upset, but the majority of upsets were not getting caused this way. The next one on the list is one that I definitely thought would play a role, and I think it did. Turnovers, we're finally getting into the ones that happen in over 50% of these games, and now it's worth mentioning as well, for turnovers, all I simply said was, did the team that upset the favorite, so the winning team, did they win the turnover battle? So you'd expect it to be around 50%, although actually it should be a little bit lower than 50% because you can tie as well. So maybe like 40% or so, and it was 60%. So we're dealing with a small sample size, and that goes without saying. A 10-game sample size, it's hard to say exactly how much this is, true, but I do think we can learn some stuff from it, even with a small sample size. And I do think that the turnover battle can, be a definite, example of how a big upset can happen. One of the big ways that I think that it correlated was in the Titans-Texans upset. The Texans won the turnover battle +5. So when that happens, there's a good chance you can create an upset. So if your favorite team week 1 gets, looks a lot worse than you expected them to, but it was a turnover battle thing, well, I think you can sort of say, okay, well, there's reason to believe that won't happen next year. Opposing quarterback goes off is another one that, this one has some significant correlation here. Now, it's less than the turnovers, but it's worth mentioning that I'm talking about they play much better than you would have expected them to. So the odds of that happening are way less than 50%. So 4.5 out of 10 actually to me signifies, okay, this is a way that these things can happen. Where I think the best example I can think of was the Cincinnati Bengals, who that was the only example where, the Bengals losing to the Jets. That was the only example where there was an upset in which only box was checked, and it was this one. It was the, opposing quarterback goes off. This was the Mike White game where he all of a sudden, had a great game. No one could have predicted that. And so because of it, the Jets were able to win. The Bengals shouldn't feel bad about that game because Mike White just happened to play incredible. If you're playing against a great quarterback, the opposing team is going to play better than you expected them to. So because of that, that created a big upset. And it seems like this can create a decent amount of upsets. And this is gonna bring us to the biggest reason why upsets happen, it seems. A bad quarterback game. This seems to be the number one reason why upsets will happen in the, also I should explain 10 point, the 0.5 stuff that is for, I put it in the kinda category. It was a bad game. It was the Justin Herbert game where he didn't play as well as he typically does, but it wasn't like a horrible game either. So I put that as a kinda bad. I didn't know where to put that. But, in these 10 instances of big upsets, Joe Burrow still played well against the Jets, but Mike White went off. So that's why they got upset. And other than that, Justin Herbert didn't play up to what you would like him to do in that game, that they got upset. And then the other 8, the quarterbacks just did not play as well as you expected them to. This happened to Tom Brady twice. The Buccaneers were on this list twice, and both times I checked off Brady did not play well in those 2 games, which kind of makes some sense, right, as to why this could be an upset. As the game is becoming more of a passing league, you're seeing, quarterbacks matter more and more. Well, it makes sense that upsets will also happen more and more then, because it's so heavily reliant on one player. One player isn't going to play the exact same for 17 games, and so when I have a couple of missteps, that can create some potential for upsets. Now, in most of these instances, other boxes were also checked, but it seems to me like quarterback play being different than what we expect tends to be the biggest reason for an upset. So what have we learned? What does this all tell us? Well, I think it tells us a couple of things. I think the main thing it tells me is that if you're a Kansas City Chiefs fan who knows you have Patrick Mahomes, who's great, if in week 1 he sucks and you look terrible, I wouldn't panic because you know that he's great. Unless you think Patrick Mahomes actually sucks now, you would say, okay, he's not going to play that bad consistently. He had a bad game. I'm not going to panic over it. Let's just move on to the next game, and you probably will look a lot better. Whereas if you're the Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes plays really well and the opposing quarterback plays as well as you expected them to play, and you still look like a disaster, chances are you might be a disaster and your team might not be as good as you expected them to be, which just happens with teams in general. When you make predictions, you're not always right. Look at my own predictions from last year, or any year I've done this. Tends to be a lot of wrong predictions, even if I get some right. The other stuff, the penalties, the sacks, the third down percentage, and even the turnovers, I'll throw all that in one category. That stuff can create an upset, but it's probably only going to be a part of an upset. It's highly unlikely that will be the sole reason for an upset, like a Mike White going off can be the sole reason for an upset, where it seems like the only way that a simple upset can happen, where like you can simply understand what went wrong, would be quarterback play. Another example, in the Jaguars-Colts game, a big part of what went wrong was Carson Wentz did not play well. That was not all that went wrong, but when Carson Wentz was playing poorly, you noticed all the other stuff that went wrong that you might have not noticed, I should say, had Carson Wentz played well. So that's what I see on this, is that that's the way I'm going to view it. Football in the future is a little bit of, if your quarterback played poorly, that's going to possibly cause an upset. So that's what I think about this. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. What are your thoughts on all of this? Always love hearing from you. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.